What happens when speed meets chaos on a short track? On August 9, 2018, the Wisconsin International Raceway's Blue Race turned into something no one saw coming. A night meant for exciting local racing quickly shifted into one filled with tension, red flags, and uncertainty. There was rubber on the track, drama in the pits, and fans holding their breath more than once. Sometimes, a race doesn't just showcase skill, it reveals pressure points. If you're into grassroots stock car racing, this event had everything: fast laps, close calls, and big interruptions. But why were there so many red flags? What really went down that night? And how did the drivers and crews respond when things didn't go according to plan? Stick around as we break down the full story behind this wild and unforgettable blue race. You won't want to miss this inside look into one of Wisconsin's most chaotic race nights. Wisconsin International Raceway, located in Kaukauna, is a beloved short track with a loyal racing community. The Blue Race is part of the Thursday Night Thunder series, and it always draws solid crowds. August 9, 2018, was no exception. Families packed the bleachers, engines echoed off the grandstands, and the air smelled of hot rubber. It was a warm, breezy summer night, perfect conditions for racing. But sometimes, even perfect nights take a turn. Drivers were geared up, tires were warmed, and heat races had already delivered plenty of action. By the time the main feature started, the intensity had built up like a pressure cooker. Local legends, up-and-comers, and returning veterans were all there to prove something. You could feel the energy buzzing through the paddock like static. Everything was in place for a clean, competitive night of racing. But what came next was anything but clean. Things started off normally, with cars jockeying for position in the early laps. But then came the first spin out, and with it, the first caution. It wasn't too dramatic, but it foreshadowed the rest of the night. On lap 12, a driver in the mid-pack tangled with another on corner exit. Both cars hit the wall, bringing out the first red flag of the night. Officials rushed out while track crews worked to clear the debris. The delay was longer than usual, and drivers started losing rhythm. Once things resumed, the tension only increased. Every driver seemed to be on edge, and aggressive moves became more common. Fans started to murmur, was this going to be one of those nights? Well, it was just getting started. Only a few green flag laps passed before another incident unfolded. This time, it was a three-car wreck in turn 3, sheets of metal and a puff of smoke. Two cars had locked bumpers and slid into the wall, while another had nowhere to go. Another red flag came out, and the frustration grew louder from the grandstands. Track officials worked hard to stay on top of it, but the drivers were clearly rattled. The announcers tried to keep the mood light, but even they knew this wasn't a typical race night. Tensions boiled over in the pits, with one crew confronting another after a particularly hard hit. Was it just bad luck or bad driving? That's the question that kept circling the stands. It's easy to blame nerves, but when everyone's pushing to win, mistakes stack up. And stack up they did, over and over again. So what was going wrong out there? Was it track conditions, or was it just overaggression? Some blamed the new batch of tires that didn't seem to be gripping well. Others pointed to the rough patch in turn 2, which had been a known trouble spot. Then again, maybe it was the drivers pushing beyond their limits. The cars were getting faster each season, but that doesn't always mean safer. When adrenaline's high and visibility is low in tight packs, it only takes one misstep. By this point, drivers were growing impatient with the repeated stops. Rhythm is everything in short track racing, and all these breaks were killing momentum. Fans were still into it, but the vibe was definitely shifting. No one likes a race where the red flag flies more than the checkered one. If there was one wreck that defined the night, it was the pileup just after the halfway point. 5 cars, 1 narrow exit, and 0 room to escape. It started with a hard nudge coming out of turn 4. One car spun sideways, got T-boned by another, and 2 more stacked up behind them. Another driver tried to avoid the mess by going low, but ended up sliding into the infield wall. That red flag lasted nearly 15 minutes. A few drivers were visibly upset, throwing helmets or arguing with officials. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, but the cars didn't fare so well. Fans stood the whole time, trying to see through the mess and understand what just happened. At that point, half the field was either damaged or out. And the question became, should they even continue the race? After that massive wreck, race officials had to pause and regroup. Some were considering calling the race early. Others pushed to finish what was left of it, even with a reduced field. There was a lot of chatter about points, fairness, and keeping the drivers safe. In the end, they decided to restart, but with new ground rules. No bumping on restarts, tighter enforcement on dive bombs, and black flags for reckless moves. It was a necessary move, but it also turned the remaining laps into more of a survival game. Some drivers who had stayed clean now had a real chance to gain ground. Others were clearly shaken and drove more cautiously. The fans gave a respectful cheer when racing resumed. But everyone knew this night had already written its own story. With fewer cars on track, the final laps went smoother, but not drama-free. A front-runner who'd led most of the race ended up spinning solo with 5 to go. That opened the door for a quiet mid-pack driver to take the lead. It was one of those classic underdog moments, and the crowd loved it. But even in the final lap, contact happened, just less severe. The checkered flag waved at last, and the exhausted drivers rolled off. Some raised fists in triumph, others just looked relieved to be done. The winning teams celebrated hard, knowing that staying out of trouble was the biggest win. But post-race interviews weren't all cheers. Some were full of regret and frustration. Drivers questioned each other's moves, and even race control caught some heat. But as always, racing moves on to the next week. The 2018 Blue Race at Wisconsin International Raceway became more than just a local short-track battle. It turned into a learning moment for drivers, crews, and officials alike. The importance of safety, awareness, and respecting each other on track was clear. Events like this remind us that racing is fast, fun, but also unforgiving. Every red flag tells a story, and this race had plenty. From equipment checks to better communication, improvements were made afterward. Drivers reflected on what they could have done differently. For fans, it was a night they wouldn't forget. Messy, unpredictable, but entertaining. And while no one wants to see wrecks, they're a part of the sport's reality. The goal is always to race hard, but come home safe. And that message echoed loudest after that night. Now, years later, people still talk about the chaos of August 9th, 2018. For Wisconsin racing fans, it's become part of local lore. Video clips circulate online showing wild spins, frustrated drivers, and track crews hustling. It's not the proudest night in racing, but it was definitely memorable. Some drivers who raced that night have moved on to higher series. Others still run at WIR and use that night as fuel for better races. Hang around the pit area long enough, and you'll hear someone say, "Remember Blue Race 18? It's the kind of race that becomes a benchmark for what not to do, but also what racing is at its core. Unpredictable, emotional, and always on the edge. And sometimes, the red flags tell more truth than the trophies. Would you have stayed in the race, or pulled off and watched it all unfold? So, what's your take on the 2018 WIR Blue Race? Too much aggression, or just a fluke of short-track chaos? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from fellow race fans. And if you were at the race, tell us what it felt like from the stands. Be sure to like this video if you enjoy real racing stories with all the highs and lows. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world of grassroots motorsports. We've got more race breakdowns, behind-the-scenes footage, and history to explore. Whether it's a clean race or a red flag frenzy, we're here for all of it. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep it fast, keep it fair, and always respect the track. This is your channel name, signing off from the world where chaos meets competition. See you at the next green flag.